are going to again revise the purpose of engagement when it comes to engaging the learners in education and training. We already spoke about that, but this unit is dedicated, the entire unit is dedicated on different engagement styles and strategies that we could use to ensure that our learners are fully engaged. So again, what is the purpose of engaging them in the education and training program? Well, of course, it helps us facilitate the acquisition of knowledge. It helps improve their skills because they're engaged, and also it creates a collaborative learning environment, especially if you have decided to include group activities, which is a standard practice, a best practice in the field of training and education as well. So when your learners are engaged, they are more likely to be attentive to what you're sharing, to the content that you're covering, and to acquire the necessary skills and knowledge in a more effective manner. Engagement is key. We have to always keep engagement as a key priority as training and development practitioners. As if our learners are disengaged, then the chances are they will not acquire the necessary knowledge, and their skills and perhaps performance will not really move to point B, where they should be. Remember, we're taking the learners on a journey from point A to point B and closing that learning gap. So when it comes to closing the learning gap, which is our role as training and development, training and education practitioners, we need to always think of ways how we could engage our learners, and that is why this level has an entire unit that covers that topic. Okay, so these are some of the approaches that you could be using to engage your learners. As I just mentioned, group activities is one is a best practice actually in the industry, and most if not all training and education programs that I have personally delivered have included group activities. Open discussions as well, where you are consistently throughout the actual training program, you are consistently involving the learners by asking them open questions and by encouraging them perhaps to share examples from their own work, from their own lives, depending on the topic of the training program, right? Another excellent activity actually approach to engage learners effectively is by organizing role plays. If you think I am going to give you an example from my professional practice as a trainer. When I used to deliver training sessions on the topic of improving leadership skills, we used to have sessions on the topic of conducting effective performance reviews or appraisals. So, and in order to support the managers and help them become true leaders, inspiring leaders, this topic, performance appraisals and the effective delivery of performance appraisals, was part of that training session. So one of the activities that I used to organize on my colleagues was role plays, where during the actual training session, the manager would have to conduct a performance appraisal with one of the other delegates, and they would swap seats. For instance, if in a physical environment, we've got the manager, and then another manager pretending to be the employee, and then they would swap places. So this is another example of a key approach used to create that engagement and to also support learning. Games as well. There could be fun games that you could organize as part of the training and education program, and also different, for instance, exercises. And if it's a one-on-one session, then it's a very different dynamic and very different approach. But here, these are examples of approaches that you could take to create engagement that are relevant to group delivery style, where you actually have a group of people. So during Unit 3, we are going to dig much deeper and we are going to talk about all the other ways and methods you could create engagement. And there will be also practices from the different industries, as depending on which industry and even which country you're from or where you will be operating, then there may be a lot of things to consider. Health and safety is one of them when we are identifying our approaches and picking the activities to use so that we can engage our learners. So health and safety is an element, compliance, also the culture. It is really important to also consider the culture as well when you are working on your delivery style and selecting the right activities to effectively engage your delegates or your audience, for instance. Okay, so this is quite an interesting unit when it comes to really the importance of engagement. We are going to talk about the types of motivation that actually motivates learners to take part in education and training programs. Remember, during Unit 1, we spoke about your role and responsibilities as an education and training practitioner, and it is important to also, although I had not written on the actual slides, that one of the responsibilities is sometimes to put the hat of a psychologist, but identifying that motivation actually is important, knowing the psychological factors that drive learners' motivation. So let's take a moment here to discuss those that motivation. We are going to be talking about, first of all, extrinsic motivation. So learners could be motivated to take part in education and training because they want to progress within their career, also because they might have received some feedback from their manager which is related to how they're performing at an appraisal, and that motivates them to then attend the training and development or training and education program that then helps them to improve their performance. Or it could be that they want to change their career, right? Or again, to obtain a qualification. So all of these reasons are actually part of their extrinsic motivation. What is the end goal? Why are they signing up to attend the actual training program? Or why, for instance, their manager has signed them up? What is the end goal? What is the objective? Okay. And then we're also going to look at intrinsic motivation, because as training and education practitioners, it is important to understand what drives people on a psychological level, because that can really help us um, really hold our delivery style as well and engage the learners in the right way, in a way that keeps them engaged throughout the entire duration of the training and development activity. So what is intrinsic motivation? It's what drives us as people internally, right? For instance, personal satisfaction, sense of achievement, also pushing our boundaries, wanting to learn something new so that we can um, push ourselves and go for that next opportunity that may be available in our organization. Or it could be as simple as actually connecting with other like-minded people. For instance, if you work for an organization where every month all the head of departments will get together and there will be a different topic discussed that is relevant to how they perform as leaders, then that will also appeal to them, because perhaps they're not only looking to acquire new knowledge and to improve their skills as managers, but also because they feel connected to other managers, to other people who may be facing the same challenges as them. So when it comes to intrinsic motivation, why are we even talking about intrinsic motivation? Well, because you could be talking about some of those motivators at the actual training session. You could be mentioning to your delegates, for instance, what are the career prospects to them when it comes to how they're going to be feeling after they've completed, for instance, the homework that you gave them as part of attending the training and development program, and now instilling within them that drive to achieve the necessary goals, do the homework so that they can succeed in their goal, for instance, depending on their motivation, their objective, right? So as practitioners, we could be talking about all of these factors, and kind of stimulating, encouraging our delegates, and mentioning these things so that we could motivate them. And again, extrinsic, intrinsic motivation, it is they are related, one leads to the other and vice versa. But as training practitioners, it is important that we discuss what drives people decision to take part, as that will then help us to ensure that their learning objectives are met in the most effective manner. So during Unit 3, we are going to be discussing learners' motivation as well as part of engaging them. And we're also going to be talking about the role of mentoring. I already mentioned to you that some practitioners choose to involve mentoring in their approach when they deliver training, because it helps them to create rapport and gain credibility that then helps further enhance their learners' engagement in their training and development programs. So what is mentoring? For the purpose of today's overview session, I have just picked a definition from the Cambridge Dictionary that speaks about mentoring, and the actual sessions that are part of Unit 3, we are going to dig deeper into the concept of mentoring, but here there is just a definition, unless you're new to mentoring, so that you can understand what mentoring is, and that is the process of helping and giving advice to perhaps a less experienced or a younger person in the job or at school. So in a nutshell, a mentor is someone who gives advice using their own personal experiences and guides. It's a form of guidance that mentors provide, right? So as training and development practitioner, you could be using mentoring to engage learners as well, and that is of course optional, and that also really depends on the topic that you're covering, because if you're delivering compliance training, perhaps mentoring is not a necessary approach for you to take. But if you are delivering soft skills training, let's say leadership skills, then perhaps using your own personal examples could be useful. So what are the benefits of using mentoring? I have listed just a few in here. Credibility, as I already mentioned. Also influencing your delegates or your learners as well to perhaps make a certain step, or even influencing them to so influencing them can be something so simple as to ensure that the knowledge that has been acquired as a result of them attending the training and engagement, training and education, perhaps, or engagement program, actually they apply the knowledge. Okay, so you could be using mentoring examples or mentoring, you could be using a mentoring approach to really influence what they do with the content that they have gone through, with the information, the knowledge that they have acquired by taking part in your training program, by giving examples of how what you have learned, how it has helped you, and how it will help them as well if they apply it. Because as part of, we're actually going to talk about that further down the session today, but as part of evaluating the effectiveness of a training program, it is important to see how to monitor the change of performance or behavior that people will demonstrate after they have come out of the training session, right? Especially if we're talking about helping the organization improve its performance, for instance. So by using mentoring, you could influence learners to apply what they have learned rather than leave the training room and forget about it, because in my experience that could happen. That is why during Unit 3 we're going to be talking about mentoring as well as a key approach that you can tap into. Again, mentoring includes advice, and also it could be inspiring, right? Imagine you having a success story that you would love to share. Well, your delegates can be inspired by that, and that is going to definitely engage them in the education and training activity or a session that you are delivering. Okay, so mentoring could be a very useful approach that you could take in order to engage your learners. Okay, now let's talk about what are some of the methods that learners can use in order to monitor and perhaps think about their whole education and training progress. Because as an effective practitioner, you will want to encourage that they continue developing, they continue applying the knowledge that they have acquired, working on their skills even after they have left the training room, for instance, or completed the program. So during Unit 3, we are going to be talking about some of the methods that you could use to encourage them to be more engaged in reviewing and improving their own, reviewing their progress and improving themselves, right? So self-reflective logs where they actually reflect on what they've learned, how they have applied it. Also, you could encourage them to set up meetings with their line manager as a means of reviewing their progress following completing a training program. You could deliver feedback as well. If you are involved in observing their performance after you have delivered the sessions to them, because that could happen if you're part of an internal training team in an organization. It is a common practice that trainers are sometimes involved in observing performance to see trainers or trainers or education practitioners, so that they could see how the delegates or learners are acting upon what they have learned. So you may be engaged in such observations and then deliver feedback to them. That is a way of you to encourage them to review their process. And creating learning and development plans is another way. Usually learning and development plans are what the manager creates together with the employee if we're talking about an organizational context, right? But very often you as a training practitioner, you may have access to those learning plans, and as a part of the strategy of the organization, you may be brought on board to design, deliver, evaluate, improve training and education programs that support the development of the employee as per their learning and development plans. And of course, a very common way which every organization in the UK and the United Kingdom has is the performance review process, or in other words, appraisals, where a couple of times a year, depending on the policies, the internal policies of the organization, a couple of times a year, employees sit with their managers as well to evaluate their progress. Okay, so now